Hello and welcome to episode 15 of No Time to Cry. We're your hosts. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Laura.
And today's episode is a bit of a follow on from last week. So, last week we wanted to discuss all the changes that have happened to us since losing our parents. And not really on purpose, but it kind of just happened that way, that we ended up concentrating on more of the positive outcomes, which seems a little bit bizarre because obviously you wouldn't think there's many positives to losing your parents, but we've managed to find some, and I think it was nice that we got to concentrate on that a little bit. But we were wary that we also didn't want to have like kind of negative positivity in terms of making out as if there's tons and tons of positives when you lose people, and not address some of the more negative things that happen to you as an individual when you've lost a parent or a loved one. So we wanted to dedicate another sort of episode to exactly that. But we'll try. Listen, I don't think either of us want to sit here and like in tears and tears and tears dwelling on some of the more difficult stuff that we've been through, but it's only right to address it, because if there's some of you sat there going, I've only lost my sister 2 months ago or 6 months ago, and we're like, yeah, I'm so grateful for the I'm so
Yeah.
grateful for this, I'm so grateful for that. And that's not to take away from the things we were grateful about. We definitely were. um but we also want to make sure that people feel heard if they're not feeling that way, don't we?
Yeah. I suppose how Shan and I discussed it earlier was that we also want to validate some of the things that we've been through that perhaps you will too. And perhaps you're going through them right now. And you're wondering if that's just a part of grief and if it's a permanent change or maybe if it's just a phase you're going through as well. Because there's certainly things that I felt in the early stages of losing mum that perhaps I don't as much now. And then
Yeah.
there are other things that have stuck with me that I do believe are probably more of a lifelong change potentially. So
Yeah, I believe we've touched on it a few times where we've said, grief is not going in one direction. Sometimes it's going down, the other times it's going up. It is a bit of all over the place. And it's weird really when you think about it, Law, because I think you're right. And sometimes I don't always remember some of the phases that I was in when I
mm,
look back. And it's only when maybe you speak to somebody else, or you talk to it, or you try and dig in a little bit deeper, that you go back through that and you think, oh God, wow, that was not a great headspace for me, or that really impacted me. I think we spoke to it a little bit from like a physical health perspective, some of the negatives that now we've turned into more positives, but that definitely had an impact on us to begin with.
yeah. I I think I mentioned, didn't I, in the last episode very briefly, that they still haven't come down actually, but I've got ridiculously high levels of cortisol. Um and I think alongside the grief, Shannon and I experienced quite a lot of trauma just with the nature of how we lost our
Yeah.
parents and with it being so sudden. So I think sometimes they're a bit difficult, sorry, to separate when you're grieving and you're also going through trauma. You're trying to sort of pick apart, well, which feelings are associated to which scenario, I
Yeah.
guess.
And there's nothing to say that it's not
It
both.
could be both, yeah, a combination of the two. But I definitely think I just felt very much on edge and quite stressed and anxious. And I don't necessarily think that's changed just yet. I still have high levels of cortisol. I'm trying to bring them down, but they're still not where they need to be. And I do put that down to grief. And it was the same with my blood pressure as well. My blood pressure changed. I think I was just a little bit, I felt in fight or flight mode a lot of the time. And
Mm,
I still some days have those times. And you can sort of get a bit of a faster heartbeat and that sort of thing, can't you, in
yeah.
certain situations? That was definitely something that I experienced. What about you, Shan?
Yeah, I'm like I said, I sort of lost all want to exercise or do anything like that. And I think had I have not maybe picked up on that a bit sooner, then that could have gone down a route where maybe I struggled with my weight a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I think when you are struggling to emotionally recognize yourself, and then you look in the mirror and you also don't recognize that reflection back on you, that's definitely something that I think that probably comes with not just grief, maybe depression or other bits and pieces. I do feel like your moods do tend to come out in you, whether that be your skin. I
Mm.
have never ever struggled with my skin majority of my teenage and adult life. Since my dad died, I've had like bad flare ups of like, spots and things like that. Not so much. I've managed to get it down now, but probably in the last 2 years is where I've struggled with it most. And again, that comes from things like high cortisol levels, all those sorts of things that just going through traumatic experiences do to you. But also, I think if you're not looking after your health and your well-being, those things kind of carry on as well. And unfortunately, when you do lose someone, you become, to the back of the queue in terms of priorities. You don't look after yourself as well as you would normally. And I think that needs to be spoke about a bit more, because I wish somebody had said to me maybe a few months earlier, I know you're putting it off and I know you don't feel ready yet, but it will actually help you.
Yeah.
Moving, getting outside, just self-care days, spending some time on you, like even things like going and getting my nails done and all those sort of things that I usually would do. I just wish I'd maybe gone had someone say to me, "Don't stop doing those things, because that you're still important. You still need to look after yourself."
And you always feel so much better afterwards. I think if there's something that you previously used to really enjoy, then it's okay to take those moments to have a few minutes of joy or whatever that might look like. If it's going to get your nails done, like you say, if it's
Your hair,
getting your hair done, just going for
go
a coffee, going
for a
for,
walk, yeah.
yeah, whatever that looks like. But like you say, Shan, I totally agree. It's the movement that helps. Just getting outside for some fresh air is it's mad the difference that can make, especially when I think we were similar, weren't we, in the early days? And I think a lot of people are, you kind of don't feel like you even want to leave the house.
No.
Um, but the truth is, once you do, you never regret it. You
No.
never regret going for a
Oh
walk
God,
and
I'm so sad I went
yeah,
outside.
yeah,
But you're right, because I think it's that, and sometimes I think because I don't know if it's just like a British thing where you're sort of like, yeah, all right. Like, oh, you
mm,
want me to move? It was like when you were in school and you're on your period and your PE teacher would be like, exercise will help, and you're like, piss off. It's like the last, but actually it does. Like as an adult, for me,
yeah. But
I've
when they make you run outside in
yeah,
-2 in shorts,
yeah.
I
I'm
hope they
not
don't do
ideal.
that anymore.
No, I hope they don't. But yeah, so it's just for me being outside, getting some fresh air. I know there was some days for me where I was really struggling. And I mean, Jamie probably wish I hadn't, because I don't think he knew where I was, but I just would go out and like sort of switch my phone off and just walk and walk and walk and walk and just kind of, because I felt trapped a little bit. And I think that was some of myself where I'd trapped myself in so much to begin with. And then I felt a bit claustrophobic where I was like, I need to get outside. Like I need to go for a walk. I need to just have a moment and put my headphones on and just walk and walk. And like, I got home and he was like, where have you been?
Oh,
Bless him. But I just, I needed to do that. I needed to get out there. And I think if anybody's listening and they're sort of not feeling like they want to get out the house. I know it's really tricky. I know it's really hard. We've all been in that space, but it will help you as much as you kind of might want it not to some degree. I think getting just a little bit, seeing some daylight, getting the fresh air on your skin.
blow away the cobwebs,
Yeah,
as they
definitely.
say.
And it's hard because you don't tend to have a lot of energy. Your energy levels are fully depleted.
They are. And even just to your point, Shan, I think just taking care of yourself is so hard to begin with. Like as you mentioned with your skin, like, there's days when you forget to drink water, which is mental. Like some of the just, the things that you need to survive as a human, just all of a sudden just don't seem important. And I think that's where it gets hard, doesn't it? To realize that actually you do still matter and that it's important to still go through that self care because
Mm.
you've got to make the most of you still have a life and
Do you think that's
actually
associated to guilt?
definitely
I do.
Yeah.
I think there's almost like a doing anything for you makes you feel guilty.
It does, but then I try and look at it on the flip side now, in that I know for a fact if mum was sat next to me right now, she'd be like, bloody hell, girl, get out there and live life for the both of us. Like, I'm not able to do it. So I'm
Mm,
relying on you to go out and enjoy yourself and to be happy. And that, if I'm having a bad moment or a bad day, I think that.
yeah.
Because my mum would have never, she loved life. She genuinely did. So sometimes that gives me a little bit of a switch in my brain to think, no, get out today,
Get your
even
shit
if I'm
together.
really not feeling like I want to, because she'd have given anything to be here, and I still have the opportunity to have happy moments and to go out and to make the most of the life that I do have. So
Yeah.
that's how I try and position it in my head, and I appreciate it's not that easy when you're having really tough days, and that's okay as well. It's fine for you to take a step back and say, I'm not going to do anything today, but tomorrow's a new day.
Mm.
So
The other thing I think I really struggled with is just not recognizing myself. I touched on it before.
mm,
Emotionally, I didn't recognize my responses. I didn't recognize who this version of me was because I'd never, and I've said on some of the earlier episodes, if you've kind of joined us maybe a couple in, I'd count myself very lucky to have never suffered with any depression. I've had anxiety over the years and things like that, but being fully depressed is not anything I've ever had to contend with on a personal level. I've had family members, obviously, that I've had to, be there for and support through depression. But for me personally, it's not something I've had. However, when lost my dad, I don't know if you'd really class it as depression because I think depression is more of a chemical imbalance, but that is as close as I've ever felt to experiencing the emotions that people that suffer with depression would have. And I just couldn't get myself out of that hole for quite some time. I was just vacant. I
yeah,
was really just walking through, and I remember crying on the phone to my sister, just saying, I don't know how I'm going to ever get out of this. Like, I've never felt this sad in my whole entire life. I've never felt this down. I've never had these strong emotions of just, what's the point? Like, what is the point? I feel that sad. And listen, I never had any suicidal thoughts or anything like that. But where I talk to that really low feeling of not wanting to do anything, not wanting to leave the house, just sat there, not even necessarily thinking about specific, just nothing, just blank, just literally. I remember Jamie would speak to me and I'd just be sat on the sofa, just like staring at a wall, just like completely
it's horrible.
vacant.
And Todd always jokes to me about this, and he mentions it a lot now. I think you had the same, Shan. I know we've not spoken about it for a while, but I had a stage where I just sighed all the time.
Yeah.
It'd just be at the most random times. I'd be in the car or I'd be at home, and obviously I was in my own head thinking things, and we might have been watching telly or whatever it might have been, and I'd just sit there and go, which is really sad. But I think it's one of those things that naturally comes when you sort of like, you do just feel kind of exhausted by it, and then you're thinking all this stuff in your head, and that's obviously just the way that your body's just kind of
Yeah.
expressing how you feel. But Todd used to say that to me all the time about, you're having a bad day today, aren't you? And I wouldn't even need to tell him that I was, but he'd hear me sigh, and
But
that'd be how
that's
he'd know.
it's true. I
But
I I feel like I remember coming round here, before my dad had died, like after your mum had, and just like talking to you, but you were
I
just
just wasn't there. I couldn't even. I
gone.
think I even struggled to communicate, and I'm still a bit bad for it now, actually. But I had a phone call. That's the way that I found out that I needed to go to see mum. I didn't know at that point that she had passed away, but as everybody knows, you just know. You
Yeah,
know, don't you? Even if there's nothing to suggest that they've passed away, there's just something in you that tells you that something's, seriously wrong. And for ages, I just struggled to open my phone. Like WhatsApp, even now triggers me really badly. Like, there'll be days where I'm like, I can't. I'm so overwhelmed with the idea of responding. And I think it was because when mum did pass away, somebody else that wasn't part of our family
Oh,
put a post on Facebook
yeah.
to say that she'd passed away. And I know that they probably didn't mean any malice or anything in doing that, but oh my gosh, I just was not ready
I remember.
to receive. I got like hundreds of messages, and that I'm not sitting here saying I'm ungrateful for that, because obviously I really was. But in that moment, it was probably an hour after I'd seen my mum in the hospital, and there was just floods of messages saying, "I'm so sorry for your loss." And I thought, I've not even had time to process what's
Yeah,
happened.
and then you panicked, didn't you? Because I remember you
It was
calling me,
horrible.
not only having to tell me that your mum had died, but then panicking that I was going to see it from somebody else, and then you
Yeah.
hadn't told me, which I never would have been upset over. You're not in control of that or anything like that. But there is all that, like, there's family that don't know yet.
That's what it was,
Please.
and it's like I say, even to this day now, it makes me very, very nervous when I open WhatsApp. I actually spoke to Sue about that briefly, actually,
Did you?
Shannon's therapist, yeah, in the early days, because I just thought, "This isn't normal. Why am I so sort of triggered by a phone?"
Mm,
And it'd be the same with I sometimes struggle to get to sleep. I used to put, you can put silent mode on your phone, can't you, so that you're not interrupted, but I can't do that anymore because I just think, "Well, what if somebody needs me?"
yeah,
Because in that time, unfortunately, a lot of people, particularly women actually, pass away in the early hours.
yeah.
And this is another thing that I'd say is one of the quite serious kind of morbid downsides actually of losing mum for me is, and it'd be interesting to hear if you think the same, Shan. I was paranoid that I would lose other people around me when mum died. Um, and that's why I now always make sure that my phone isn't on a sleep mode. I was paranoid that Sienna had stopped breathing and stuff as well when I first lost mum. And you could argue maybe that's part of being a mum for the first time as well, which I'm fully sort of aware of and could be in the case. But it just made everything so much more real to me
Mm,
that, mum was somebody that I loved so very much. She was here one minute and then gone the next. And I think that's what was so much more significant in my brain, was that everything that you love, this is going to sound awful, but everything that you love one day won't be here.
yeah. People get a lot of
So
health anxiety and stuff, don't they, when people
yeah.
pass away that like that. Well, I don't know if I told you too much about it at the time, Law, because I know it would have been triggering for you. But after your mum passed away, um, I felt a bit like that, but this is before my dad had died. I think because it was so sudden and she had no signs of ill health, it shook me as well, where I was like, "Oh my God," a bit panicky. And Jamie, I remember I was at work one day and he texted me saying, "I've had to come home from work. I'm really not well. Like, I'm not I've got really poorly tummy and I'm being sick." And I was like, "Oh, a bit panicky over it." I was like, "Well, I'll come home because I can work from home."
Mm.
And then that evening I got home and he was just really unwell, like on the sofa. I could hear like him groaning like in pain whilst he was sleeping. And I was
Oh.
super, super anxious. Anyway, I said to him, "Right, I think you should get into bed. Like, let's go and get into bed." And our house is like an upside down house. So our bedroom's on the bottom floor, bathroom and kitchen and dining room on the middle, and then living room on the top. So we went to get into bed and he said to me, I need to go upstairs. Like I feel like dead clammy in here. Like I can't breathe." So I was like, right, okay. Anyway, he said to me, he walked up the stairs and I heard him shout for me. And I was like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" I ran upstairs and was having a fit,
Yeah.
but he was being sick at the same time. But he was on the stairs, so his head was like bouncing off the stairs. And I was trying to call the ambulance, but my literally my I was just hysterically crying, and they were saying things to me like, could he lift his arms above his head before, and I was like, no idea. There's not, no one walks around like that, but they worried that he was having a heart attack. And
Oh
that's
my
the thing.
God.
And you think, obviously, unfortunately, that was the situation that happened to your mum.
Yeah.
And it was only a month after, not even, maybe 3 weeks after Laura's mum's died, and I was traumatized. I couldn't even, the the ambulance took forever to come as well. Luckily, he came back round and then was still being sick, and then, came and they took him off. And I think he was just really unwell, and his temperature has spiked, which had caused him to have a fit. But I've never seen anything so scary in all my life, because one, I thought he was going to choke as well. I was just like
You just
in
you
this.
just how do you prepare to
Yeah,
help someone in
and
that situation?
Jamie, I remember afterwards, he said to me, like, I genuinely think that was more traumatic for you than it was me. He was like, because I just don't really remember it. He was like, obviously, I knew I was throwing up. He's like, but with everything that's gone on with Laura and her mum, like, I was literally shaking. Like, I couldn't
Imagine.
get over it. And I don't remember speaking to you a lot about it at the time, because I thought, not a great time to talk to you about,
No,
about
you
it.
did though, to be fair, but you were very like, bless you. The way that you spoke to me about it was like really considerate, because you know what I was like as well after losing
Mm,
mum. I'm I am a bit ashamed to admit this, but it's true, and I think for other people that are experiencing this, it's okay for you too as well. But I just googled everything about like, could she have been saved? What if the ambulance had got there sooner?
yeah.
Could she have been misdiagnosed by the doctors? Could this medication have helped? And it sent me wild.
You had,
I was
I'm not,
awful.
there's things we won't talk about on here, but you went through some really weird
I
theories.
did. And you know what? And again, this unfortunately is one of the downsides. Well, like there's many downsides, unfortunately, as we say, but it can send you a bit loopy.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking rationally at all, and
No,
maybe I don't know what this would be like for somebody who, has a loved one who's sick, and I can't even imagine that pain either. But
no.
for me, I couldn't understand how mum had died or why she died, because I'd spoken to her just a few hours before. And then even in the hospital, the doctors couldn't figure out what had happened
Yeah, it
to
took
her.
weeks, and
It took ages. And they said to me, it's definitely not a heart attack. It was actually what they said to me in the hospital. So I was thinking, well,
what is it then?
what on earth
Yeah.
could it
So
be?
your brain goes a bit mad.
It does. And honestly, I don't think anybody wanted to look at my search history then. I need to make sure that's fully wiped for life. But I had all these conspiracies about what could have happened, who could have been involved. Like,
Yeah.
it sent me absolutely daft. It did, to the
I
point
remember
where
speaking to you
Shan
about
was like, Laura, like, you need to just calm down. Like, I know you were
Laura was
looking for
ready to get a
answers, but
detective hat
Jesus. I
on and
was.
thing like, who could have been involved?
I
But
was.
it's
It's normal
scary.
though, but
Of
it's
course
also
it is.
normal. I know it's not very nice, and if you're going through it right now, I thought I was just losing it. I'll be honest at the
I
time, but it is a normal.
again, you're looking to rationalize things. I feel like some of my family were a bit like that. With my dad, obviously, because my dad took his own life. They were a bit like, well, who was the last person to speak to him? What was
Mm,
said? Was there listen, I think if my dad hadn't have had a real bad history of mental health and like alcohol and things like that, maybe that would have been something I was more um intrigued to kind of find out. Obviously the police investigated it all anyway, and there was nothing that came to light, but it wasn't something that I spent a lot of time thinking about. But I know there was definitely family members of mine that even to this day would love to get access to all of his text messages and his phone calls and see what was discussed and who he was talking to kind of hours before. But
it's not worth it though, And the
no.
reason why I say that, and you know this, don't you, Shan, was there's something I really regret, and I know that I did it because in my head I had sort of racing thoughts, and I had many of them, as I've alluded to, but I was paranoid that mum knew. Not previously that something was going on, because she didn't know she was
Mm.
poorly. I know that in my heart of hearts, I know she wouldn't have known.
But there was a few
But
things,
she did a
wasn't
Google
there?
search, didn't she?
Yeah, and I remember, did she not have just changed her will or something to
Yeah,
put
which is
Sienna
weird.
on?
Like a few days just before. But there was a Google search that had put, is pain in your neck like something to worry about after you've been drinking?
Mm.
Something along those lines. I can't remember exactly. But it was that, wasn't it, Shan? Um and obviously that just broke me. Because I just thought, bloody hell, why didn't you say something to somebody? I mean, again,
Yeah.
she obviously didn't think it was serious.
No.
She just thought, oh, have I drank too much? And my mum, bless her, the one thing she did have is she has something called an esophageal webbing. So my mum always had a bit of a struggle sometimes with eating and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So that actually wasn't that unusual for her. So maybe she just thought, oh, I've overdone it a bit. Obviously, she
Mm.
liked to drink, as everyone knows.
Hmm.
um, but I wish to this day I'd never looked. Like, that didn't help me at all in the
No,
slightest bit, because then
doesn't
I
bring you
thought,
any peace.
no. And I don't know why I did it, but again, your brain's curious. Like, you just, like you say, Shan, you try and rationalize things, especially when you can't get answers. You're struggling to cope with the grief. And actually, I don't think you can grieve when you lose somebody suddenly until you get to the bottom of what's happened.
Yeah,
And sometimes you never actually fully get answers, but obviously I was sort of in limbo with the rest of my family and my mum's partner trying to figure out, well, nobody knows why a healthy 55-year-old has just suddenly passed away.
mm,
Um and naturally, I think as a human being, that just makes you so inquisitive about, well, what could it have been? And then your head just
yeah.
goes,
Well, that's it. Because my dad, his phone actually only recently got released from the police to my I think they gave it to one of my uncles. And my one of my uncles messaged me and said, "Do you want it? I don't know the code." And I said, "Well, I could probably guess it. Like, I could guess what one of his codes would be or whatever." And it he ended up my uncle's actually not sent it to me, but it was something that was kind of hovering over me where I was like, do I actually want it? Do
mm,
I, although there would be photos and stuff like that on it, is it something that I want, or is it going to
cause you more
cause me
pain.
more pain, or am
Yeah.
I going to see something? And I'd almost said, if I do get it, and I manage to unlock it, what I might do is ask somebody else to go through it for me first and sort of remove anything that would be painful for me to see, because I'd almost rather not know,
Yeah, I agree.
because I feel like I'm this far along now, I'm 2 years in. Listen, there's so much stuff that I'm still dealing with in regards to like grief, and just maybe giving myself space to still grieve and space to still feel sadness when you kind of hold yourself to a really high like expectation of being strong-willed and trying to get through stuff, that I don't know if I want to push things back to. I don't know if I want to be back in a place where I'm worrying about those kind of things, because like Laura.
You can't change it as well. Like I said in the last episode, and I always do this now. I always think, if bloody COVID hadn't been a thing, could Mum have gotten the attention she needed? Because I always
Mm,
say to you, Shan, don't I? Mum did eventually go to the doctors. I think a few months before she passed away.
about our health just in general, isn't
Yeah, because she did like to make sure she used to call them like MOTs. Like,
it?
she's just like, she liked to just check she was all right. Which again, like I say, she cared about making sure she was okay, because she, obviously she wanted to be there for her kids and for her new granddaughter. But I think, of course, the NHS is under so much pressure, and it is really difficult. And for a long time, you couldn't even get a face-to-face appointment.
Mm,
Even now, actually, they'll try and give you a telephone
yeah.
appointment. Um, but I remember she went in and she said to me, "Oh, I feel like I've got a bit of like acid reflux." And naturally, a lot of doctors nowadays say, "What do you think? What do you think it is?" And she would have said, "Oh, I think it's acid reflux," and they gave her medication for acid reflux.
Mm,
But then I often said to her, "Is it helping, Mum? Like, is it improving?" And she said no. And in my heart of hearts now again, excuse me, the one thing that bothers me about that is, I do think, was that the first sign that
yeah.
she did have an issue with her heart? But of course they didn't investigate it. They didn't do any
No.
ECGs, they didn't do any echocardiograms, anything like that. So she would never have known. But yeah.
I think these are all things. I feel like we could talk forever on this episode, because there's just loads of really bad stuff that kind of.
Supermarket grief, like we said the other day.
Yeah,
There's all
like
sorts.
there's just like a bit of everything, and it's all so different. Like when I think to just, even my experience of your grief and your experience of grief, they are different because of how our parents died. They're both sudden. There's a lot of like similarities in that sense, and the shock, but even just the mindset that Laura has in terms of like living for her mum, because her mum would love to be here. Like, I am always super mindful that my dad's was a choice. He chose to kind of take those steps to go, so that's something that I think you kind of I has probably brought me some comfort to some degree, but also a lot of pain. And I think I mentioned it on my episode where I spoke about dad, and kind of what happened is I just have to kind of respect his decision to make that choice. But it certainly has changed a lot of my outlook. Like whenever I see people post about, somebody passing away from suicide, there is just a part of me that goes, oh, I wonder how long they were suffering for. And that part of you, that is a big change that's happened to me that I think is a positive, but also can be quite negative, because I think there's a part of me, which you definitely have this as well, where you want to help, but there's
Yeah.
not
There's not
always
always something you can do
this,
to.
yeah, there's not always something that you can do that will bring people any form of like comfort, or um even when I hear people are suffering with their mental health or anything like that, I feel like I've got a real attachment to it now, because it was like, maybe there wasn't things I could do for my dad that maybe I could help with somebody else. And, some would say, maybe is that like a bit of a hero complex? Probably,
Yeah,
can I
definitely.
swoop in and save the day? And that's not possible in a lot of cases. People need some real like help from individuals that have had training and degrees and things that I don't have in those areas. But it's sort of a double-edged sword, where I feel like I do have a lot to offer in this space, but trying to not put any pressure on myself to try and solve you know
No,
everything.
but like you said though as well, Shan, saying something is always better than nothing within reason. As we've said before, there's certain things we definitely don't recommend you say. um, but just being able to offer a little bit of compassion and to say that you're thinking about somebody does go a really, really long way.
Yeah,
So yeah, that is a huge one. And like we said, there's some more of the day-to-day stuff that affects you, isn't there? Like it breaks my heart now when I see things in the shops that I either knew my mum loved anyway, or that I would want to buy her. So
yeah,
I think again this particularly is probably more prevalent around holidays or specific times. Obviously, of course, Mother's Day is not far away now. Um and that hurts so much more now because I see things that I'd love to pick up for mum and I can't. I mean, I
yeah.
could, but
Where are you gonna put them?
yeah, she'd find, like we've said before, she hated waste. So I just think, well, I hate that. And even things like we've said before in regards to mother daughter days and like spa days and
Yeah,
seeing mums at the cafes and stuff. I think that's a big one for me now that I never even thought twice about not being able to go to a spa with my mum again. And the weird thing is actually I went to a spa with my husband um for our anniversary last year, and all I could think about was the last time I went to the
mm,
to the spa with my mum. And I'm really hoping that doesn't overshadow and put a really
yeah.
sad spin on it for me because I love a spa. It's always it's always been
I
something that
love a
I've
spa.
enjoyed. Yeah. It gives me a little bit of like, I mean, it's very rare I go for one, but it's just meant to be a place of peace and relaxation. But my mum loved them and didn't get to go on them very often either. And I took her to one not so long before she passed away. And I always just thought, oh, this will be a nice thing for us to do, every now and again.
Yeah.
And you just never think you're never gonna get the opportunity to do that again. So I think that also kind of tarnishes and taints.
Mm. I think you could go on forever, couldn't you? It's really hard
Yeah.
to kind of put, because I feel like we've covered little bits of it on like our triggers episode and things like that. But realistically, it all just depends on how the day and how I'm feeling, as to
Yeah.
what's like I'm finding difficult. I mean, in general, I think there's just, we spoke about some of the positives in terms of outlook on the last episode, but there's definitely parts of grief that maybe make certain aspects of your outlook not the best.
Mm.
Maybe, especially in those early days, I don't think I was a very positive person. Like, I don't, and that has changed. It's like Laura said, it really depends as to where you are, and there's no time limit as to how quickly you go through different stages. For me, it might have been 3 months. For Laura, it might have been 4, or vice versa.
You can go through some of them on the same day,
Yeah,
can't you?
definitely. But there was just I think I was maybe a bit more pessimistic, just like not looking for more of the positives in life. Whereas now, as time has gone on, that's something that I search for, because I find it brings me a lot more peace. I don't like to dwell on negative stuff, but I do think there is a side of that there's a bit of avoidance there. And I had a therapy session yesterday. and I was speaking to Sue. You remember it from a few episodes ago when we was talking about the triggers and like weddings and stuff. I've not had a chance to speak to Sue. We've had to move a couple of our appointments. And I said to her, I'm kind of trying to get my head round feeling sad about my dad not being able to be there, but then also part of my brain's like, well, should you be sad because you might have chose for him not to be there depending on whether he's well or not. And she said, why can't you be both?
Both. Exactly.
Why can't you be sad that your dad isn't there, and sad that you might have chose for him to be there, and sad that he could have been there? Why can't you be sad about it all?
Like you said about your dad, Shan, it was your dad's choice in the end to not be here, and actually
Yeah.
that choice was taken away from you.
Yeah.
So I think you've got to think
Well,
that.
she said to me, just make space to be sad about that.
Of
Like,
course.
stop trying. I think I have a really bad habit of trying to.
You like, it's black and white. It's not a case of,
Yeah,
or you
I'm
can
a
only
very
be
black
one
and white
over the other.
person.
Like you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, well, that's something I'm
can
working
feel
on,
both
have been
ways.
for years, is trying to get comfortable in those grey areas and create those grey areas where it doesn't have to be so black and white about things. But
Yeah.
she said to me, well, I think I try to rationalize my feelings before I felt them. I try and like logicize them. What's the word?
You
Logicalize them.
you've just literally got to let yourself feel them. You've got
Well,
to give
that's
yourself
it.
the
Whereas
permission
I'm
to
trying
feel
to
them.
explain them to myself and trying to acknowledge them and say that's okay if I feel like that, and which is important. But I'm doing that over feeling them sometimes, which is not, is something that again is a personal thing for me because of how I've grown up. But I imagine there's a lot of people out there that sometimes are trying to rationalize and whatever the word is, logical. I tried to get you to help me before, but you didn't.
What?
Like make them logical.
Rationalize them. Rationalize.
I've heard someone say it where it's like logicalize. I don't know what things like where you make it.
It
Anyway,
could be a new word.
it could
if it
be
isn't
whatever
one.
I want it to be, guys. Um, I'm not the best with my words. I try my hardest. I like to talk. I'm just not good with them. So yeah, I'm like I've acknowledged that yesterday, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's something. But even for me, she made a point of saying, set yourself some boundaries in that on that day and that situation. Like if you think that there's going to be some overwhelming feelings for you on the wedding day and you'd rather them not, then you can just have those conversations beforehand. Like I said to her, I don't want my wedding day to be overtaken by the grief of my dad not being there, because I've got the rest of my life to feel sad about my dad. Do you know what I mean?
Do you know what, Shan? It won't be though. And then, do you know why I say that? I mean, obviously, I'll be there to hold your hand every step of the way, but my brother's just been through it, and he
Yeah.
had the exact same fears. And I think for anybody who unfortunately has to experience, one of the happiest days of their life, their wedding, without their loved one, it is really hard. But you will find it in you to make that day about you, because
Yeah.
that's what your dad would have wanted for
Yeah.
you as well.
Well, that was a bit like the
So-
conversation we had yesterday, and I think it's just trying to. I'm not someone who I like to have things almost planned out, so I feel like I've got more control over the situation. That's something that brings me comfort and like safety, and it's trying to get to grips with the fact that I don't always have the ability to do that.
No.
But that's something that's kind of happened a bit more since like grief and going through stuff with my dad, where I'm trying to understand my own patterns a bit more and my own thought processes and how I handle just life in general, because I'm not the same person that I was before.
You
you
need to learn who the new version of yourself is, and that might sound a bit deep, but I've always said it, and it's a very sad thing to say, but let's face it, it's the truth. I do believe, and I think you're the same, Shan, a part of me died when Mum did, and I am not the person that I was before.
And there's parts of
So-
you that don't want to necessarily go back to the person that you were before,
No,
because
true. Yeah.
I think there's big parts of that, like we said last episode, have been positive changes for us. But sometimes you get glimmers of like that old person prior to losing someone of yourself, and you're like, oh shit, I thought I'd lost that part of me, or I thought that wasn't
it
there
comes
anymore.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah, you sort of, I think it's almost like you have to learn to figure out who you are again. And actually, if it is a different version of you, sometimes that's okay, because
I think
you need to adapt ultimately after you've lost somebody, because it is a life-changing event. And I think
don't
there's
minimize it.
don't minimize it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think a lot of people think, oh, you've just got to sort of move forward and try and find your new normal and all of that. And that comes with time, but it is a new normal. You are trying to navigate things differently. You probably are going to experience big events in your life that are totally different to how they would have been if your loved one was here. And it's funny you say that about the wedding as well, Shan, because I spoke to my friend Zoe yesterday, and unfortunately she had lost her mum from a heart attack very suddenly. Um and she got married after her mum passed away, and she said there was one particular wedding magazine that she looked at, and she saw a picture of the mother of the bride, obviously in a gorgeous outfit, and she just broke down in tears to the point where she couldn't pick up another wedding magazine
Oh, bless her.
even up to the day of her wedding, because she was just in absolute agony every time she thought of the fact that her mum would never be able to wear her mother of the bride
Yeah.
outfit. And she said, I had to just put that in a box and just think, actually, I'll find other happiness in my wedding. And it was still the best day of her
Yeah.
life. But she just knew there were certain things that were very triggering for her in the run up to it. So,
Maybe as we get closer to my wedding day, we can go on to that a bit more, because I'm certainly not going to be the only person that's getting married after losing a loved one. And I do feel like there is a lot around that even for myself, I will be dealing with for the next 12 months, where I'm kind of like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that was going to make me
yeah, yeah.
upset, or I'm okay with that. Or, for me, everybody that's going to be at my wedding knows my dad's dead. Do you know what I mean? And I don't feel like it needs, and this has only been a conversation that I had yesterday with my therapist, but I don't feel like it needs to be a big thing that's spoke about on the day, because, you know, yes, obviously there will be a mention of my dad. That would be weird if there wasn't, but I don't think it needs to be spoke about consistently throughout the day, because, we can celebrate my dad at any time, and
You'll find your way to honour
yeah,
him. You will. And whatever
that's it.
that
And
looks like for you is what's right for you.
I think that's the whole thing for me. I think it was playing on my head of, well, how do I do that? How do I manage my emotions on the day? Because I know if people bring it up, my brain will kind of like make a bit of a switch, and I don't want that. I don't want to be absent for any part of it. So then, Sue was like to me, well, just like, if you can take control of any day and what goes on, it's your
It's your
wedding
wedding day. Exactly,
you and
yeah.
Jamie can have that discussion. You and Jamie can talk to that and say, what do you want? What do you want him to mention in his speech versus what you might not want him to mention in his speech? Or, you can have those conversations, and everybody there will understand that, because everybody knows what happened, why. And also, I'm wary there'll be other people there that may also find it difficult to hear my dad being spoke about, or in great detail on that day, because it would be odd for others as well. So yeah, not to make this episode about me towards the end, but
No, it's
you know,
really important. And like you say, you might even decide you want Demi to do a speech.
maybe.
That's what my brother did with my sister, and it was beautiful. And it felt like my mum was in the room. It was bizarre. But
Mm,
that's what he did instead, of having. I know some people have like a chair and that sort of thing,
it's
but
not for me,
I
that.
hadn't found that too difficult. He said
Yeah,
that's
it's too
that's
difficult
too
for me.
obvious she's not there.
Yeah.
Like, I already know she's not there. I don't want there to be like a physical representation of the fact she's not with me. So, but again, on that, there's no right or wrong. If that's what you wanted to do at your wedding, then that's okay. But you will find it. You'll find the way to honour your dad and still have the most incredible time.
But
So.
this is the thing, right? I'm 2 years in. Laura's just over 2 years in, and there's still these like mountains, I suppose, to get over and deal with, and I will have them for the rest of our lives. And that's why it's so difficult, and probably why we ended up concentrating on that more of the positives, because I think it's easier to round them up.
The sad what the thing is with with what we said as well, Shannon, is the sad things are in everything. Like, we could sit here, like you say, probably for weeks and
Yeah.
talk about them, but actually, that is just the nature of grief. Unfortunately, it's a lifelong thing, so you're always going to carry it with you. And even there's a trend on TikTok actually at the moment that's quite triggering for me, because it's something that I looked at the other week and I thought, oh god, I need to update that. But it's called My Emergency Contacts. I don't know if
Oh
anyone's seen it.
shit. Yeah.
And my mum and my husband are my emergency contacts. You're also on as well, Sha. You get, I don't know what it's like on Androids, but on an iPhone,
Yeah, my dad was one of
if you
mine.
click your
I've
phone
not
like
looked.
5 times,
Yeah.
it essentially alerts 5 people in your phone, to the fact that you're in danger or whatever that looks like. And my husband's my top one, and then it's my mum, and then it's you actually third, and
Because she
then
knows I'll always turn up, guys. I
my
can't say
brother.
that I'd necessarily put Laura as mine because she doesn't like to drive on motorways and I live 45 minutes away.
I'd do it for you. I'd be there. I mean, everyone probably have to get off the road and be like, Jesus Christ. But yeah, my mum is still my second, and I can't remove her. And I know that's absolutely no use whatsoever, because if I'm in
No,
trouble,
but
then,
it's silly things like I've still got my dad's number in my phone. I've still got your mum's number in my phone. It's just not something that I would delete. I don't know why.
never,
It's like
never.
it's just going to be there for the rest of my life. And sometimes you'll be typing in somebody else's name and they pop up and you're like, oh, but then I'd rather fill that than get rid of it.
100%. And I think at the end of the day, it was always their number, it was always their phone, it was always a part of,
Mm,
your phone goes everywhere with you nowadays, doesn't it? So in my head, I've always said that it'll stay that way.
yeah.
Although I obviously need to update my emergency contacts, because it's probably a bit dangerous. She's not going to be much use. Sorry, Mum, you would have been amazing when you were here, but
Do you can make
if they
it.
try and ring you now, yeah. So yeah, that's it. It's just daft. Sometimes it's the daft things, isn't it? Like the small things that make you think, oh, that's really sad, and you'll unfortunately find some of those throughout the rest of your life. But the positive side of it is that you do get through them day by day. Some of these things that you never
Yeah.
thought would affect you, you do, but then you overcome them, don't you?
Yeah.
So
And listen, I think Laura and I have both touched on previous episodes, like relatively speaking, from where we were when we first lost our parents, we have come so far in how we handle and deal with our grief on a day-to-day basis. That doesn't minimize the feelings that we do have about it, but it certainly doesn't plague me as much as it did in those early days. All those feelings are there. I've just managed to find space for them within me and deal with them better. Whereas they are so overwhelming to begin with. And if you are really feeling overwhelmed, like I want to give you some confidence that you, you learn to deal with it. I don't know how, but you do. It
yeah,
must be built into us as like humans in terms of, forever and a day, people have always passed away and grief is something that's part of, just being
life.
alive. Yeah. And being here. So I don't know if it's like a physiological thing or whatever it is, but some way somehow you make space to handle and have those feelings with you. It takes time, but it does happen. I don't really have an explanation for that, but it just does.
It kind of becomes part of you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In the early days, in particular, like you said, Sean, like it's probably like inconceivable actually how painful it is, and anyone who's going through it right now knows that. It's just like,
Yeah.
but you do learn to carry it, and actually there are some things that you find very difficult in the early days that you find comfort in later on down the line
Well, what did I
as
say to you the
well.
other day? I put a TikTok up actually. I was at a concert and one of my dad's funeral songs was played by the warm up act. And I just was like, oh my God, like it obviously made me a bit teary, but I was like, wow. And then the next day I was getting my nails done. Less than 12 hours later, I was in a nail shop and one of his other funeral songs came on. And I was just like,
Oh,
I feel like previously that would have knocked me back, but I felt like it was
he's
something that I
connected to you.
needed.
He's
Yeah.
there. That's
That's
how
what
I
it
always
felt
think
like.
of
It
it
felt
now.
like it was a bit of a reminder to me, like keep doing what you're doing. Keep like I've got you. I'm here. Which I know some people say it's all bollocks, but for me, I felt like I needed that. I felt like I needed a little like push from
It's a
him to
sign.
say,
It's a sign to
I'm
say
still
he's,
here. I'm
yeah.
looking out for you. Because like one song you could say is coincidence, but two songs within the space of 12 hours, I was just like, all right, Dad, I hear you loud and clear. But no, but for me now, that brought me a little bit of comfort because it was just like I felt close to him in those 2 days. It felt like he was there with me, and it's something that I was like, okay, yeah, I feel better hearing that. I feel better that I know that you're nearby. Whereas I can't say a year ago that
Oh
I would have
no,
felt that
definitely not. You
same
wouldn't have.
way.
No.
Um, But yeah, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I keep forgetting to mention it at the beginning, but basically, if you want to share any stories with us, message us about it. I did say I was going to put it on the beginning of this episode, and I didn't. Maybe I can do a bit of editing or whatever. But yeah, we'd really love to hear from you and hear about like your loved ones and the people that you've lost, and tell us a bit more about their stories and almost a bit about their legacy and how you can keep their legacy going by telling us about it and letting us read them out to our listeners and followers. But yeah, thank you so much. Give us a subscribe on YouTube. Give us a listen on Spotify. Follow us on all of our social media pages, because we do put quite a lot up there actually, whether that be from quotes and little interesting tidbits that we find online, and funny little videos of me and Laura pretending that we're now TikTokers.
Yeah, we're definitely not.
We're not, but we're trying, guys. Please give
We're
us
giving it a go.
give it a like just to help us, a bit of encouragement.
Millennials over here.
Yeah, well, I'm on the cusp.
Mm.
I'm 96. I'm on the cusp. I'm not quite owning millennial or Gen Z, if I'm honest. But
I'm pushing you into that category.
Yeah. But we're trying our best. So yeah, give our post a like, show a little bit of support. But again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.